to episode 2 of Laura and the Grumps. I'm your host, Laura, and I'm here with Grump 1, Van.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do a little bit better on the enunciation piece this week.
And Grump 2, Bose.
I'm here.
And we're here to talk about the Home Run Derby / All-Star games, the All-Star game coming up, and / basically, do All-Star games, are they really losing their touch and their meaning? So, let's get started. Now, the Home Run Derby is something that
I'd like to quickly interject on some of the, I know we're all Big Ten fans.
Yeah. Oh, is this about Pat Fitzgerald?
On Pat Fitzgerald and, finally a decade later of hazing. Hazing, hell, me and your dad grew up in the 70s and 80s. That's different hazing. And some of the sick stuff that was put out, it's a little demented. Fitzgerald knew about it, and so did a lot of other coaches. But he's taken a fall. Really, it should be higher up because your trainers know about this. Hell, when I played, in the late 70s, 80s, hazing was a different freaking world back then. And I'm not going to go into stuff that would happen because you would get pretty much your ass kicked. It's a different time, and there's hazing still going on everywhere. You go to the Orioles game or something, you'll see the rookies dressing up as costumes and wearing Barbie stuff. That's people can say that's insulting too, but it's a ritualist sport. I get it. I feel bad for Fitzgerald. He was a very good coach, but he's become the scapegoat of Northwestern, and there should be other people be fired, especially the trainers. The trainers know about this. They see these kids day in, day out, and their kids are talking to trainers, teachers, other people, and for a decade to let this go, it's a sad story.
Yeah, I'll add into that. He's totally right. You grow up in the 70s and 80s and 30 years in the military, hazing is really, we just call it training, to be honest. People don't necessarily like it, but heck, we used to make the most jacked up guy in the organization carry around a bowling ball that was painted like an 8-ball. The objective is you didn't want to be that guy. It doesn't necessarily make it a great thing or anything like that, but to some degree, it is a part of life, as in how you establish pecking orders. I totally agree with Fitzgerald, who, I think he's sort of a scapegoat. I don't know if it's warranted or not, but I don't know if Northwestern really knows what they got, because he seemed to be a really good coach. He might not have been the best mentor ever, but I do agree that there could have been other heads roll, for lack of better words. And he does sort of be left hanging out to dry.
Yeah, I feel the same way too. It was weird because Northwestern, they've never been really a powerhouse at football, but it was just weird because I remember like 10 years ago, you and I, we were watching a game this was back during the Brady Hoke years. Mm. Every Michigan fan wants to forget those years, but and I remember you were telling me, yeah, I really like Northwestern's coach, Pat Fitzgerald, because he's a big supporter of military troops. And yeah, and then just to have this happen. Now, the thing is, I'm not saying Fitzgerald is a bad guy or anything, but, you don't want to be hazing. But I do agree with you, Bose, and you, Van. I feel like he is the scapegoat, and it's just not very respectful for Northwestern to treat someone who's been their head coach since 2006 like this. So, yeah, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and one thing to add on that, I was listening to your boy, Lamar Arrington, this morning, and you sort of had Fitzgerald's back too.
Yeah, it's when you play, even through high school, being hazed, or you pledge a sorority or fraternity, you get hazed. Yeah, trust me, I'm not going to tell stories I've been through. Laura, you'd cry like, oh, holy shit.
Yeah.
It was 70s and 80s or different decades, even in 90s. But it's a ritualist sport. That's what it is. You all it's sort of paying the piper of going through it. And I think, I listened today. Peyton Manning's always been, a huge advocate of no hazing the rookies. And they would make sure he was the senior people for the Colts would make sure Peyton's nowhere around when they would haze the rookies. There were stories for the Steelers. They would duct tape rookies to the field goal post. It's hilarious stuff.
That actually happened?
Yes, it actually happens.
Add one thing onto that, and not to get, 'cause I know you got a whole agenda there, Laura. Now, in the way the military would look at it, it's a great subject that Mike brought up. And I think that's why it relates to football and hockey and those things a little bit more, which is, again,
it's a team building thing because your seniors been, the elderly have been through it, and you don't want to let them down, especially in the military, because you're going off possibly to a war and you got to have each other's back. Yeah, sports is a little different. They call football, a battle and stuff, and which is bullshit. And LeVar Arrington would say the same thing, but dude was a freak when he played at Penn State.
Well, and LeVar was also from a military family. Yeah. So, which I respect the heck out of. You hit the nail on the head, though, really, when you talk about the team thing. And that's why it's not really the hazing piece or the torture you put them under. It's the test of, can you trust that person? That's why it translates into football so well. And that's why I think LeVar sort of, again, I'm not advocating for hazing, but the reason why you do those things is, will that person in the trenches, which, football, it's called the trenches in the line, will they have your back? Are they going to sell you out? It sounds so juvenile to have somebody in the military. You'd have somebody go chase flight line, which doesn't exist, or squelch oil, which doesn't exist. But you're testing that person if they're going to continually question some basic rule sets. And if you start questioning every rule set that's out there, it becomes chaotic. So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
And I sort of have to agree with you, Van. So the thing is, playing sports is a lot like being in the military in a way. And especially in a dangerous sport like football, of course, no one's going for their lives here. But in a dangerous sport like football, you really need to have each other's backs. And of course, hazing does break those bonds. But I mean, is it like something dangerous, or is it just like a prank thing?
Oh, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or borderline criminal stuff would go on. But hey, I'm proud for the kids at Northwestern finally for speaking out. So it's a very tough topic, hazing and stuff, but it is part of life. And it goes on, and we can move forward, Laura.
Speaking of criminal, is the way that all the major sports have totally diluted all-star and pro bowls. So anyways, all right, go ahead with your subject.
Oh, yeah. So I actually really like where you guys started talking about Pat Fitzgerald, because if our awesome viewers remember from last week, at the end of our show, we had a segment about what we're into, or sorry, my train of thought is just all over the place, but we had a segment of what's going on in sports right now, and Pat Fitzgerald, him getting fired, is one of the 2 things that I had as what's going on in sports right now. Another interesting thing, and then I promise, Bose, we'll get to the home run derby because we all know how big of a fan you are of that. But another thing that's really interesting happening in sports right now, I call it poetic justice as a Detroit Lions fan. Matthew Stafford, the Rams are looking to cut him. Stafford did win a Super Bowl his first year in Los Angeles. However, last year the Rams finished 3rd in their division. They went 5-12. And yeah, Stafford is pretty gimp right now. So my fellow Lions Van, how do you feel about this?
I feel pretty awesome about it, but I don't want to make this a homer show. So let's just say that It's not a bad thing if he goes somewhere else.
Michigan homers over there.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? But hey, he won a Super Bowl. Good for him. He's got one more than my Lions do. But I'm back on your subject on the awesomeness. I do love the home run derby. That's my favorite one of all the All-Star stuff.
Of all the derbies?
Of all derbies. I mean, it's the most interesting and the most entertaining. Well, no, I like the Preakness.
That's the Kentucky Derby.
But it is the most entertaining. I think it's better than the actual All-Star game. Anyways, that's just...
Yeah, so the Home Run Derby we're recording this on July 11th. The Home Run Derby was yesterday, July 10th, and the winner was Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who plays for the Toronto Blue Jays. Huge congrats to Guerrero Jr. His father actually won the Home Run Derby back when he played. So great father-son duo.
Yeah, one of the sweetest swings in baseball, Vlad Jr.
Yeah, he was awesome. I remember, did he play with the Expos when he won?
His father.
Yeah. It's funny. The home run derby evolved because baseball was sort of dying in the late 70s and 80s, and everything started evolving of different things. I think what really set it off, I remember I was a kid in the late 70s, the Battle of the Network Stars came out, and they did all these different sports. And us kids that are in the summer, that's what they had. The networks had to put this crap on during the summer because there was no really TV except for baseball, and we imitated it. So, and the baseball stadiums were, losing fans, and there was riots going on in Cleveland for beer night, or Detroit, or Chicago for 5-cent beers and stuff. And baseball had to become young. And I sort of respect where they are now of changing the rules. Baseball's a young sport. You got to get the kids back involved, and that's what they did back in the mid '80s of this home run derby. I remember when I was a kid, we get repeats. They actually, Laura, the home run derby started back in the 1950s and early '60s, and it was a black and white thing. And the winner, we get like $2,000. Mickey Mantle. I used to watch it all the time. And, me and all my friends in my neighborhood, we would go find a little league baseball park.
Wait, Bose, you had friends?
Yes, I have friends. And we would go to a little league baseball park and do home run derby. And especially when we're older, it brought excitement back. At first it was a little boring. Then in the 90s with all the steroids, it really took off. I remember it was a ritual. Home run derby, we would go to a bar, watch it, drink beer, and eat wings. That was our Monday.
Did you ever, I know I did this as a kid, and I'm guaranteeing you probably did, but did you ever watch them, and then when you did it in the playground, backyard, whatever it was, did you ever imitate their swings?
Yeah, most definitely. We would imitate all our favorite baseball players. I remember, my one friend got married around 91, 92, in the middle of Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere. And after the wedding, there was this like little league field, and we had like 3 hours to kill. We're wearing, our tuxes and all that. We played home run derby.
So how old were you at this time?
At this time, probably around 24. But this is the peak of where Kasenko, the Bash brothers of the A's, those guys were tearing it up with monster home runs. And, it's the old, and that's also the decade Nike had some of the greatest commercials ever. And they came out with probably the best baseball commercial, Chicks Dig Long Balls. And it's true. It brought out also the women to the baseball field of what this home run derby was doing. And it got stale dated in the, around 2008 to 2015, where it just dragged on, and you had Chris Berman going back. And that even got freaking old. But they're making adjustments, and it's probably one of the most exciting things uh, of watching, because you hitting a baseball that freaking far is ridiculous. And hey, I'll be a homer right now. Adley Rushman, he put on a freaking show last night, and the first ever hitter to be a switch hitter to hit home runs on both sides.
He still lost in the first round.
Yes, he did. But that's fine. He put on a show. He is truly the best catcher in baseball.
Okay, so yeah, that's the home run derby. Ignore Mike's bias in the side. I do like Adley though. Adley seems like a great guy. No shade to him, but ignore Mike's bias. Anyway, so
I'm bias on him. He is the best baseball player catcher right now today. Legitimately.
But what does catcher really mean? I mean, it's not like he's. I mean, I liked how you couched it. It's not like we're saying he's the best pitcher hitter guy, because we all know who that would be. I think he's the best catcher and definitely the best hitting catcher in the league. But what does that mean? And when you're all basing it off the positions,
So it's just what it comes down to WAR. Yeah, I think Lore's familiar with that. Ever since he joined the Orioles, they have taken off. It's his leadership, his batting. He was a field goal kicker for the Oregon Ducks.
That's not an attempt to try to get him to kick for my Lions, right?
Well, he could probably be a better field goal
That's
kicker.
not saying much.
yeah,
And there's a highlight after he did his switch hitting home run skill. He tackled McCaffrey.
So, Mike, I'm confused though. If Adley is the best catcher in baseball, how come Jonah Heim for the Rangers ended up getting the All-Star lineup over him?
Texas people voted for him a lot more than Adley.
That hit on one.
Heim is leading the league in the catcher role, but Adley is, he is proving it right now. The kid's legit.
That actually, you pointed out something that Laura hit on yesterday as we were discussing that, which is some of the selection pieces and biases in the sport and how they get there for the All-Star game.
Yeah. So, for example, I remember 8 years ago in 2015, a ton of Kansas City Royals fans ended up basically hacking the system where they got their entire lineup except for Mike Trout, who was in the outfield. Basically, they got the entire lineup of Royals players for the American League side of the All-Star game. And it's led us to think, teams with a lot of fans, they can just vote their favorite players into the All-Star game. And then we were all talking, okay, maybe it should be decided by journalists, but then we're like, oh wait, but journalists, they're probably going to vote for either New York or Los Angeles people because, they're in those areas. But how do you two feel about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like the Kansas City scam was a scam. But now you're only allowed supposedly 20 votes per email. I've done that. I homered Adley and Hayes. I'm glad Austin Hayes is starting tonight. I'm homering the Baltimore Orioles. They have the second best record in baseball for basically sucking for 5 years.
They do not actually. Tampa Bay's still ahead of you guys.
I said second best record.
Actually, Atlanta has the best record. Tampa is the second best. You guys have
We're tied with losses.
You know what? I think the Orioles are doing awesome.
I think they're doing awesome too.
But to go back to your
manipulate data, you can't manipulate data.
But to go back to your question, Laura, MLB's tried to control it, but when there's Texas Rangers have a way bigger fan base than the Orioles or a lot of small market teams. Yeah, the Yankees, if they had 60 wins right now, half their team would be starting, and it's just the way it is. I think you need to weigh down the fans' vote from 50% to less, but the fans get pissed. But it is what it is.
I
A lot of players eventually drop out because they're tired, and now with the new rules of the clock for pitchers and stuff, it's at least for the baseball, they try to get it right. It's a difficult thing.
I personally disagree because Tampa Bay has arguably one of, if not the smallest fan base in baseball. But however, Tampa Bay has two players, Randy Ozerna, and they also have Adalius Garcia. Sorry, I might not be pronouncing those names right. In the starting. Sorry, Garcia plays for the Rangers. Yeah.
Well, because you also got to look at the fan base, also ethnicity. Arizona is awesome. When you got people from the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and all that, and they will vote for those players. I'm a huge also fan of the Tampa Bay Rays. That team with their payroll, I think their total payroll is like $60 million, and they constantly win. They know how to draft and they know how to groom players, and they'll dump someone immediately. All their stars eventually go. I'm a fan of Tampa Rays, and I love seeing it succeed. But now with the Orioles, right there on their butt, we'll see by next weekend if they can take over first place. As long as the Yankees, stay way behind.
I'll echo sort of what you said earlier, though. I mean, you did say, and Laura, you actually sort of reinforced what Mike said.
Yeah, I mean,
because you mentioned.
Well, Tampa Bay, they have the best record in the American League, but Texas has more players on.
Right,
the
but
starting.
Mike's point was that the Major League Baseball gets it more right.
Yeah.
So if that's the case with a fan base that's incredibly small, which is Tampa, right?
Yeah.
Why would they even have one person on it?
That's true.
I mean, they should have nobody on it. They probably got one of the smallest fan bases in baseball. So at least baseball sort of gets that right. I think, at least from my mind, one of the issues that you have is that looking at the all-star games, the professional, sports and what they produce, I just don't know if any of them are really that interesting. Because I think we just admitted that the home run derby is at least in my mind, is more interesting than the actual all-star game.
Yeah. So before we get into that, basically for the all-star game, for the American League, Texas Rangers, they have by far the most starters on the team. 5 of the starters for the AL comes from Texas. They are Marcus Seaman, who's on second base, Corey Seager, who's the shortstop, Adalmios Garcia, who I know I just said he plays for the Rays. He does not. He plays for Texas. He's in right field. Yandy Diaz is who I meant to say plays for the Rays. He's playing tonight too. Josh Jung, who's on third base, and Jonah Heim, who's a catcher. And then for the NL, the team with the most starters is a tie between the Braves and the Dodgers. The Braves have Ronald Acuna Jr., who's in right field, Sean Murphy, who's the catcher, and then Orlando Arcia, who's shortstop. And then the Dodgers have Freddie Freeman, who's first base, Mookie Betts, who's center field, and, of course, my beloved JD Martinez, who used to play for the Tigers. He's the designated hitter.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah, I remember when he made it for the Tigers 9 years ago in 2014.
Yeah, it's a sad day. Tigers have sucked since, pretty much then.
Whatever.
Did you guys know Mookie Betts will now replace the so-called July 1st payday of Bobby Bonilla Day when he retires from baseball?
I have not heard that. You know the history behind the Bobby Bonilla payday, right?
No.
I'm going to let Mike explain the biggest payday, the smartest financial move by a player ever.
Mookie Betts just beat that 10 times over. So, Laura, when it's all about having a smart agent, like someone like me, as like an accountant to manage your money, or have an attorney also was an accountant also. So what Bobby Bonilla's agent did was when the Pirates got rid of him. He signed the Orioles. He had a huge fat contract, and the Orioles picked it up. Then they eventually traded him to the Mets, and the Orioles were smart. They traded majority of his contract to New York Mets, where the Orioles are part of his salary. So he gets about 1.5, 1.4 million a year. A million of it comes from the New York Mets, and the other part comes from the Orioles. And that's going to be ending probably sometime soon in the late 2020s, 2030. But Mookie Betts, but the Orioles also notorious. Right now, they have the highest paid person, Chris Davis, where they just wrote him a check for about $12 million on July 1st. He has like one more year left after that. Then he gets another like 1.5 for another decade. But Mookie Betts' deal, I think it starts when he retires. He averages around 10, $11 million for a decade. That's a huge payday. His agents, and that's from all his money from Boston and the Dodgers. And that's smart. That's also the GM too, of being smart. Of okay, yeah, we'll sign you this $500 million contract, but we're gonna put this, even though they're over their luxury tax, but they set it aside. So that's the GM and his agent, his accountant slash attorney, giving basically his family, his kids, a trust fund for the rest of their life. So it's kudos to those agents and stuff that did this stuff. Yeah, a lot of people get pissed off on it. Yeah, it sucks, but you know what? It's smart investing. Um, you're setting your kids up, forever.
Well, I mean, it really is ingenious. I remember the Bobby Bonilla because he played for your awesome Pirates.
Yeah, he played for the Pirates, and Pirates when that year sucked. I was there in 1992 or 91. We played the Braves for the National League championship, uh, and we lost in game seven. That went down to Atlanta, and because an old man could not throw, it was the biggest mistake by the Pirates. Then that's when they fire sold the team, just like your Detroit Tigers will be doing over the next 2 weeks, of getting rid of Bobby Bonilla, Barry Bonds, and all that.
No, totally not happening because we're winning. We're winning the our division. I know I want to say NFC North, but that's football. The Central because we're gonna win it with we might be 20 games under 500, but
yeah,
it is our division.
Our pitching's really good. Yeah, our pitching's really good, and we have really good pitching.
Wait, let me add something to the thing about the Tigers, which I think we're sort of undercutting the mediocrity that is the our division. Yeah, maybe the Tigers aren't great, but I'll tell you right now, what is great? The fact that we're in an incredibly competitive division
of sucking.
Yeah. So we're talking about the All-Star game. I think we all have mediocre, aspects of what we think about the All-Star game. I'm not a super huge fan of games. I would say that of all of them, I would rate the Major League Baseball All-Star game as number one in my opinion of all of the Pro Bowl All-Star games. I would say number two is probably going to be hockey, believe it or not, even though nobody plays defense. Number three, 4, maybe 5 years ago would have been the Pro Bowl. But I'm going to say actually the NBA All-Star game, which still doesn't play defense. And then finally, what they've done with the Pro Bowl, or whatever you're going to call it now, which is flag football, that's my worst. I know we weren't doing like a rating thing. I'm just pointing out that I just don't like Pro Bowls or All-Star games.
Yeah. So for me, I personally think all-star games in all sports have really faltered. I think baseball was really the only one that had sort of stakes to it because it used to be whoever won the All-Star game ended up getting the home field advantage for the World Series. But yeah, I feel like All-Star games have really lost its meaning. You remember back in the 90s, Stevie Yzerman, he got into a lot of trouble for skipping the All-Star hockey game.
Well, and I still hate, well, I think it was actually early 2000.
Oh, yeah,
and that's
early
actually why we lost to Mike's Penguins.
Yeah.
Because Bettman had it in and he hated the Red Wings. And so he suspended our players, which cost us home ice advantage because he didn't want to play in a stupid All-Star game that nobody cared about.
Always sounds like Michigan homers over there, crying about something.
Anything could get Kid Crosby a championship, and I get it. He's a great player. Get out the old, bring in the new at the time. Come on, man. I mean, you didn't have to suspend and then have us lose home ice advantage.
You lost anyway, so.
Yeah, so I mean, I also believe NBA All-Star I never watched, but the one that I think is definitely the worst, it pains me to say because I love the NFL so much, but it's the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl just, it sucks, man. I mean, the fact that it's literally a week before the Super Bowl, and that's basically just the NFL's attempt to market the Super Bowl for 2 weeks instead of 1 week. And the fact that neither team that's competing in the Super Bowl has any players in the Pro Bowl, yeah, it's just really weak, man. What do you think, Dad?
Yeah, agreed. I'm not going to add anything. Well stated, well said. Rubber stamp that take.
No, I agree. The NFL one has lost all its luster. They don't care. I think Goodell, Goodell is a jackass, period. If he was smart, just move it back to Hawaii. More of the players would show up. You turn it into flag football, which eventually the NFL will be flag football 20 years from now. The owners are, again, you got to protect your players, but they're some of the most underpaid players. The average salary for average person is, just around $1 million, and they're out of the league in 3 years, and they have no freaking pension, and they're playing the roughest sport, next to hockey. Actually, hockey's tougher because most football players, would quit after one day, going and crying. You want me? I got cut, and you want me back on the ice? Yeah, stop crying, bitch. Get back on the ice. That's hockey's the toughest sport. Football's right there. But yeah, the NFL football all pro, it's a joke. Move it to Hawaii. The family, that's what pissed off the athletes. That's why more of them are not showing up, and they don't care because it was a paid vacation for them by the NFL to go to Hawaii for a week, and they should move back to that. And it gives, I think Hawaii would take it back in a heartbeat, and the athletes, football players would go, okay, yeah, I'm going to go and do it after the Super Bowl. And yeah, you probably the Super Bowl winning team would not show, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, as I've been saying before, I really think All-Star games have lost its luster, but it still is a fun time for fans. They get to see their favorite players, or at least their for Royals fans, their cheated favorite players that got in.
But baseball one's still truly the most purest one out there. You may not like it, but most of the baseball players show up when they are there, unless they're truly injured, because they know the rosters are huge, and to be part of that, situation of being, like right now in Seattle, you may never make an All-Star game ever again, and to show up with your wife and your kids and see all these great athletes like Trout, or even back in the day, with the Bonzes and Kasenko and Bobby Neal and Prince Fielder. I remember Prince Fielder's when he was going to the game with his dad, an All-Star game with his dad.
Cecil.
Prince,
Yes.
former Tiger.
Cecil
Yes,
too.
yeah, former Tiger, and that's classic stuff of watching. Even like Ken Griffey Jr. and all that, and playing with his dad. Baseball right now. Yeah, the All-Star game's boring and draw. It is very boring because your starting pitcher is going to pitch at least 2 innings, and you're going to have massive rotation, except for a few of the huge stars. But baseball is the only one who really has it right. What they messed up was when they tried to tie it to home field advantage, and that's a dumbass commissioner. He messed up there. That was BS. I'm glad that's gone.
Disagree. I actually think it was good because it had something for real stakes. It brought people a reason to watch.
People will still watch it no matter what. He was just wanted to make it more competitive. It's not going to be competitive anymore. It's not back in the 70s, 80s. In 70s when Pete Rose knocked over the freaking Mets catcher and ruined his career. Those were the glory days, the 70s and early 80s.
He shouldn't have been standing.
It was part of their paycheck.
He shouldn't have been standing there, yeah.
No, he shouldn't have. But these players weren't making, millions and millions and millions of dollars. Back then, they had other jobs. Laura, when you go to work at, Camden Yards, if you ever run into some of those older players back in the 80s and in 70s that show up, talk to them. And they all had second jobs, every one of them. So they hustled. Yeah, we're grumps, but it's a different time. Even football players, like I said, growing up outside of Pittsburgh, Terry Bradshaw's dad was the manager where my dad's steel mill was. And you had, football players that would go in the steel mill and work off season, and even baseball players and all that. So it's a totally different era because the owners were greedy back then in the 70s. They didn't pay. And, I think you definitely probably studied about free agency, Laura. Who started free agency, Laura?
I think well, I'm not Laura, but I'm telling you, wasn't the guy from Curtis Flood?
Yes, Curtis Flood.
Yeah. He changed the whole dynamic.
He was Negro, and he fought the system because he saw others, the owners, screwing people. And that was a huge stand up. Hank Aaron, I remember I stayed up that Monday night where he hit his, that home run to break the record, Babe Ruth's record. My dad allowed me to stay up because they had it on Monday night baseball. We used to have Monday night baseball, Laura, on ABC with 2 drunk guys and a really old grump guy, Howard Cosell. You'd really love him. He was a true grump, but you tell it out, he was. You think me and your dad tell you how it is? Howard Cosell would pretty much tell that to your face and make you take it no matter which way.
Awesome. I'll tell you, awesome discussion, awesome subjects. I think we can all agree that we shouldn't be hazing people in all-star games.
Yeah, and we also agree that Dad and I are homers. But anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to episode 2 of Laura and the Grumps. Hopefully we didn't offend anybody with this talk. Also, see Barbie, not Oppenheimer. And
no, definitely Oppenheimer. Definitely.
Bose, what do you
No,
think?
see neither. I'd rather go see Barbie.
See?
Because that's totally fake.
But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 2 of Laura and the Grumps, and we'll see you next time. We are signing off.